Hello, my name's Lorray.
And I am Heather.
And you are listening to the Breakthrough Podcast. Yay! How you doing today, Heather?
I'm doing awesome.
Yeah?
Awesome. Yep, lots of stuff going on, raising money for my son's second mission, and just really excited to see what God does. Still got about 7 days left as of today, which is Friday the 13th.
Oh.
Yeah,
Oh.
Friday the 13th.
Oh. Good thing that means nothing, otherwise I'd be terrified.
Yes.
For all of you who tuned in I want to say last week, but it was actually 2 weeks ago. You can definitely hear the passion that he has. You definitely hear that he's ready to get in there. He's ready to work. He's ready to serve. So from your perspective, just listening to him last week, and just, I know you kind of hear it every day, that he's home, and it just kind of jacks you up. I know before he spoke last week, you were saying like, hey, this kid's got some stuff.
Yeah.
Like, just, man, he's rocking my world right now. Can we have him on? I'm like, yeah, dude. Kid's on fire. So what has that been like for you? Just seeing all of the different stages of his life that he's gone through, and how God's really worked in through his heart, like being on both spectrums of it. So being on the, like you said before, like, is God really good too? God is great. This is why. And I'm going to get out there and I'm going to go to countries that, Christians are down or looked down upon, and I'm going to get out there and put my life on the line for my faith. So how has your perspective been, or what has it been like from your perspective?
It's been quite a ride. Definitely. Mark has always been a very energetic child, and just from the time he was little. But he had some extra challenges that he was dealing with when he was younger. He had a lot of anger, and that was really hard for me because I was trying to help him through the anger, but the anger was in the household. And so it wasn't really something that he could just get away from.
So it's kind of the makeup of his environment.
Yeah, it was the makeup of his environment. Every child with their different personalities needs to be met where they're at. And that's something that I learned when he was pretty young. He was very hard-headed, very strong-willed.
Aren't we all?
Yeah. And it could be frustrating. And I remember when he was 4 years old, I got this book called The Strong-Willed Child. And I read that book because I'm going, okay, I've got to figure out how to handle this kid without strangling him. And how do I do this? On top of the other things, just the fact that he was just hard-headed. So I read that, and I don't remember a lot of what I read in that book, but I did take away one thing that stuck with me forever, and that was that strong-willed children were born to be leaders. And so when I found that out, when I read that, I went back to my 4-year-old son and I said, Mark, you are strong-willed for a reason. You're stubborn for a reason. God has created you to be a leader. Now, my question for you is, what kind of leader do you want to be? And from that point on, him and I both started to work together to figure that out. But there was a lot along the way. There was a lot of frustration. There was a lot of overwhelm, of times of being overwhelmed. His dad left when he was 10 and a half. And
oh, man.
Yeah, so that was it 10 and a half or 11? It was back in 2009.
That's a pretty significant, impressionable age.
Yeah, and that contributed to his anger. And I was going through a lot. His dad and I had been together since I was 14. And so that's a lot of emotional baggage that needs to be unpacked. And so I had to figure out how to be a mom to him, to his sister, and to his other sister who was on the way. I had to figure out how to be a mom in the middle of the mess. And that's something that I think a lot of people are dealing with, is that sometimes they feel like their life is just a mess and they don't know what to do with it. And not only do they feel like their life is a mess, but they've got kids that they've got to somehow figure out how to raise while they're dealing with a mess. And, how do you do that? And so I'm watching him go through this, and I'm just seeing his heart. And I know as his mom, I know that he doesn't want things to be the way they are. He doesn't want to be angry. He doesn't want to be so full of anxiety, but he doesn't know what to do about it. And I'm sitting there going, okay, God, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do about it.
Right.
So I just started really pushing into God, and it was an amazing journey with him, and with God, to try to figure out how to be a parent and be real. I see a lot of times that a lot of parents, and this was something that part of me wanted to do, but I tend to be really just open, and like my life is an open book, which is great for ministry. Just being able to say whatever's going on. But
Right.
As a parent, there's a fine line that has to be walked, and a lot of parents want to shield their kids, and they want them to just not know how bad things can really be. And, my son was kind of thrown into how bad things can really be, and not to the worst that it could have been. We know a lot of people that have gone through a lot worse than what we have. But his word says, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." So if the truth sets you free, then why bother hiding it? So I decided, okay, no matter how ugly it is, according to his age, let him in on the truth. Let him know. This is the struggle that I've been through. This is what God did. This is what God taught me. This is how God healed me. This is where he worked. Or even if it's a current struggle, Mark, I'm not perfect. I'm struggling. I'm dealing with this. Not to make him my therapist. Huge difference. You never make your child the therapist. Okay, they're not supposed to be the one that you lean on. However, they do need to see what it's like to have a real walk with God, because that's how they figure things out. If they don't see you walking with God when you're stumbling and when you're not, and being real with them, being honest with them about, I'm not perfect in this area. I'm struggling. And I know people tend to lean on that phrase, "Oh, I'm not perfect. Oh, I'm not perfect." But really be real about it. I'm struggling here. I haven't perfected this part of my life. This is something that I'm still working on. But I'll tell you what I am doing. I'll tell you what God has shown me. I'll tell you what the promise that he's given me has been, and go from there. And I remember that during all of this, and divorce and custody battles and just all the drama that comes with all of that, that God he let me know that if I could trust in him, that even when I messed up, even when I wasn't doing things right, even when I was afraid of how everything was going in the other household, and are they doing this right, and are they doing that right, and all those other fears that we can have pop up in our head, if I could remember that the Lord will teach my children, and great will be their joy. And that means he will compensate for any of our failings. Not just my failings, but his father's failings, his stepmother's failings, his stepfather's failings, whoever is involved in his life, that, or his sister's lives, that God will compensate. And so I got to a point, and it hasn't been a perfect walk because, of course, we have new things that pop up. And when those new things pop up, we need to learn a new level of faith.
Right.
And lean on God more and learn to trust him more. But I was able to get to that point where I was able to say, okay, God, you know what? It doesn't matter what's happening, because whatever happens, you already have a way to correct it. You already have a way to fix it. You already have a way to heal it. You already have a way to show me that it doesn't even need correcting, or it doesn't even need fixing. Whatever the situation is, you already have a way. And so since you have the way, and you have promised me, and this is a promise for all parents, which is so awesome, because we can sit here and go, okay, if I can trust and I can lean on God enough to say, God, teach my children, I'm holding on to that promise. I'm asking you to teach my children. Then we can relax a little bit. We can let God work with us. We can be imperfect. We don't have to tell our kids, yeah, everything's fine. No, everything's fine, sweetie. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. Guess what? Everything is not always fine. I'm not always fine. I'm not always okay. And I've gotten to the point with my kids where I'm willing to say, you know what? It's okay that I'm not okay right now. I'm frustrated. I'm angry. And I'm not going to apologize for my emotions. I'm not going to apologize for these times when I'm not all happy and when I'm not thrilled with my circumstances. However, even though I'm not happy with this, even though I'm frustrated, even though I'm angry, I do know that God is working. And so I can trust in that, and I can work through these emotions and get to the other side of them. So that's what he saw with me, is just pressing past the emotions and letting them know that I was there to listen, and letting them know, like, Mark is someone that for a long time he and this has actually been great for his ministry, but as a kid, it was very interesting because he'd often say things for shock value. And so I got to, listen to some very interesting, colorful things. Just because he wanted to see what reaction I'd have. Then just as he got older, he's always been one to just speak his mind and to just lay it all out. And one thing that I learned because of a support group that I went through that actually took me through this 12 steps. It was called Boundaries in Marriage. And I took it several years ago when Mark's father and I were still married. And I went through all the 12 steps and picked someone to be my sponsor and to walk the walk with me of healing from my abuse in my marriage. And one thing that just was so awesome for me was that I told my sponsor everything that has ever happened to me, everything that I've ever done. And nothing that I said shocked her. She was real with me. She was definitely real, but never shocked. And so when I saw the benefit that it had for me to have somebody that I could talk to that didn't make me feel like I was a problem, like there was something wrong with me, I think I just naturally, by the grace of God, just started to incorporate that into my parenting. And so Mark could come to me with anything, and I would not be shocked. I would not. I had to be intentional about it sometimes.
Right.
But I was not going to be shocked. I was not going to make him feel like there was something wrong with him, because there wasn't. All of us are in different areas of our walk, and we need somebody that can meet us right where we're at. And so that's what I did. I just worked with him, met him where he was at, let him go through that. We'd have discussions about God, and he'd bring every single question or every single debate that he was being told, and he'd bring it to me, and he'd say, well, what about this? Well, what about this? Well, what about this? And then I'd just kind of sit down and say, okay, let's go over this. And I'd tell him as much as I knew, and teach him as much as I knew, and then just trust that God was going to compensate where I didn't know everything that he needed to know. And that's exactly what he did. As Mark grew, when he was about 16 or 17, we went into the School of Kingdom Ministry that was offered by the Vineyard. And it was $200 each person, and me and my husband Stephen, we decided that we were going to just pay for his daughter Macy and for Mark to join us in this class and just see what we could get from it, see if this could help us get closer to God and understand God better. And so we went, and I sat there and I watched Mark, and he'd be on his phone, and he wouldn't open the book, and he looked like he wasn't really paying attention much at all. And I'm looking at him going, $200. we're spending $200 to have him sit here and play on his phone. And I'm like, okay, God, $200. This is $200. And I just really felt like God was telling me, just in my spirit, just meet him where he's at. Seeds will be planted. Just let him be himself here. Even if that means he's playing on his phone, let him do what he needs to do and leave him alone. So I'm like, okay, $200.
But $200, Lord.
$200. I'm like, okay, seeds will be planted. And so I just held on to that. Seeds will be planted. Whatever happens, some seeds will be planted, and we'll see what happens. We'll just let this be. But this is at least exposure. At the very least, it's exposure. Mm-hmm. But little did I know that God had other plans. So me getting out of the way, mom wanting to have her hands in everything, but me getting out of the way and stepping out of the way, I got to see God move. And saw Mark prayed for, and he was healed of back pain. And we watched his leg grow out right in front of us. He had one leg that was shorter than the other, grew right in front of us when he was prayed over. I freaked. That's the first time I'd ever seen anything like that happen. And I'm going, oh my gosh, his leg just grew. Did you see that? His leg just grew. I'm looking at Mark and I'm like, did you see that? Mark? Your leg just grew. That's how much God loves you. That's how much God loves you.
Wow.
And I just freaking out. I was just, and then his eyes are wide and he doesn't know what to think. And he's getting up and he's walking around. And he's going, oh my gosh. My back doesn't hurt anymore. Oh my gosh, my hip doesn't hurt anymore. Oh my gosh, I can walk straight. He had to change the way he was walking up and down the stairs because he didn't have to compensate for a short leg anymore. He didn't even know his leg was short. He didn't even know. He just naturally compensated. So he almost tripped down the stairs a couple of times because his leg was longer.
I'm only laughing because I know he's okay.
Yes.
For everyone listening, I'm only laughing because he literally walked out of the room just now, so I know he's fine.
Yeah.
But that's hilarious. All right. Go ahead.
Seriously, he caught himself. So no injuries. But it was in that moment that I saw a switch happen. And a fire started to grow, and a curiosity and a desire to know more. And he was close to graduating high school. He actually graduated School of Kingdom Ministry days before he graduated high school. And so it was perfect timing because after that, he's like, I want to go to YWAM. And I said, fantastic, YWAM. So let's see what we can do. And we started fundraising. But he went, he came back, he told his story about the freedom. When he's talking about the tearing, he's referring to anxiety. He had been dealing with anxiety since he was a baby. And so the anxiety would show up in different ways throughout his life. And so he went into YWAM with this anxiety. And so that's what he's talking about when he's talking about the tearing, is this constant feeling of anxiety that never left him, that affected his sleep, that affected his ability to handle challenges and interact with people and not have outbursts of anger. And when he went to YWAM and he experienced just that anxiety just be broken off of him. I mean, when he came back, he was a man. And he had this glow and this smile and just this freedom that was all over him. And it's this freedom that I had prayed for 20 years. For 20 years, I prayed for this freedom for my son. And I said, God, I'm not perfect, but I'm going to walk the best I can with you. And I'm going to be the best example I can be. And I'm asking you to compensate for me and to teach my children where I cannot teach them, to teach them through me, to teach them through their teachers, to teach them through their church and through the stranger on the street. To teach them, because nothing that I can do is worth it without you. So just teach my children, because if you teach them, great will be their joy. And when I saw my son, great was his joy. Great was his joy. And I looked back on those years of struggle, and it felt like nothing. And it was all worth it. It was all worth it. So I look at other parents that are struggling now. They're looking at this situation thinking that, how can I do this? How can my child come up well? How can my child love God? I mean, I'm doing this all by myself. I just feel like I'm in a losing battle here. But there's power in a praying parent. There's power in one parent that's willing to just surrender everything, humble themselves before God, feel the pain, be real with their kids, and walk the best they can and trust God to compensate for them where they mess up. If you're able to do that, if you're willing to do that, if you're willing to say, Lord, I surrender, help me in my resistance. If you're willing to just be a real parent, flaws and all, and just let him work in you and through you where you're at with your struggles. Let him heal you and let your kids see that healing. And tell them about your walk and tell them about what God has done. And just trust them and pray for your kids. He will turn things around because he promises that he will teach your children, and great will be their joy.
Right here. That is amazing. Amazing. And I really hope, to everyone who's listening, who is a parent, it's innate when it comes to your child to want to protect them, shield them, and have your hands all over whatever that they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But as Heather said, there's power in, a praying parent.
Mm-hmm.
There's power in a praying parent, and there's power in fully trusting God.
What's really awesome about being able to trust that he will teach and that he will compensate is that there is nothing that cannot be repaired. There's nothing that can't be fixed. There's nothing that can't be healed. So if we can, as parents, teach our children to turn their eyes to Christ as their healer, as their comforter, as the one that can pick up the mess, sometimes the mess that they've made, clean the mess up, and get them on the right track. That it doesn't matter what they've done. It doesn't matter what they've been through. That all they got to do is just go back in the direction of the Lord. Mm-hmm. He will see them, and he will embrace them, and he will take them back into his home as soon as they're ready. Because someday, every single parent on this earth is going to leave it. And when we leave this earth, what do our children have if they don't have the hope of Christ? So, if there's anybody listening out there now that you've fallen away from God, or you never found him, you never had that connection, that relationship with him, you can start that now. And you can let God work through you, and you can pray that prayer and ask him to teach your children. So in order to do that, it doesn't take much. He who believes in his heart and confesses with his mouth that Jesus Christ is Lord, he shall be saved. So that's what you can do right now. Just take a moment. If you're in a car, please do not close your eyes. But just take a moment and just say, Lord, I need you. I need you as a parent. I need you just as a human being. Come into my life. Show me how to turn away from the things that are hurting me and turn my eyes to you. Thank you that you are willing to embrace me just the way I am, that nothing that I do, nothing that I say will ever shock you, but that you are always there for me. So, Lord, come into my life. Be my Lord. Be my Savior. And be the teacher of my children. In Jesus' name.